I knew that I needed to come back to myself. I knew I had lost a piece of me somewhere along the lines, and I wanted to come back to myself. We are smart enough to know these conditions have been created to diminish me, to undervalue me, to hurt me, to push me to the edge. But I'm just gonna keep at it because I'm gonna make it better, right? I'm gonna push through, I'm gonna push through, I'm gonna push through. And we push through so much that we have nothing to give anymore. He was like, just take the summer off and rest till you need to play and play till you need to rest.
Hey friends, and welcome to the Next Best Thing podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Cline-Thomas. I'm here to help you live a life that you design instead of choosing a life you think you have to settle for. Question: are you at your limit? Have you literally hit a wall? You're like, I don't have any more to give, but you just got to show up every single day. Are you desperate for a drastic shift or a change? If so, you're in the right place. My guest today embarked on what she called her radical sabbatical. Daisy Auger-Dominguez was the chief people officer at Vice Media, a job she started in May of 2020. Now, we all know the challenges of that moment. Add to that, Vice, not long after, filed for bankruptcy. There was a lot of restructuring. All that means is that there was a whole lot of stress on Daisy. And she said it left her more than burned out. So she took months while in the role. She spent months planning her next. She spent months planning her transition. And instead of hopping to a new opportunity, she said she just needed a moment. Have you ever felt like, I just need a pause? I need a 20-second time out, pause everything. That's what she did. And so she really wanted to get back to herself. And so in this conversation, we really talk about Daisy's radical sabbatical. She breaks down what that actually meant for her, what got her there, what she knows now, but more importantly, what you need to do if you feel like you are at your wit's end. I am still trying to figure out how to take a sabbatical. I'm trying to work it out. I'm trying to get systems in place, but seeing Daisy on the internet talk about this has made me so hopeful to say, oh, no, I could do this as well. I'm in the planning stages, right? I just need to get my ducks in a row. So I can't wait for you to listen to this conversation, to watch this conversation. If you're on YouTube, as always, let me know your thoughts. All right, let's get into the conversation with Daisy. Well, Daisy, I am so excited about having you here because ever since I met you, I've just been following along. I've been kind of sneak stalking you, and I'm just amazed, right? Because as you know, people say you're not new to this, you're true to this, right? The next best thing, the whole idea of it, how you've been able to just navigate your life. But I think the thing that I've loved the most is that the core passion and function has always been the same. The fire has always been the same fire. You've just kind of lit up different places. So I'm just thrilled to have you here with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm equally excited to be here. This is a conversation I'm always happy to have.
Look, we have to be talking about the things. I want to start at not the end, but last year. I want to start there from last year, right? Your role ended at Vice at August of 2023. Describe to us, where were you? Where was your mindset? Where was your mind frame? How did that feel?
Oh my goodness. I was burnt crispy. I wasn't even burnt out. I was burnt crispy, right? If you picked at me, I was just disintegrating. I, like many others, had gone through COVID, leading teams, trying to hold people together, trying to get work done, trying to figure out all of the emerging changes that were coming our way with little guidance, right? With no rule books, just trying to make do. And in addition to that, the added weight of going through a financial crisis, the challenges that came about for our organization. And last year, having just, by the time I left, we had completed our bankruptcy and a rapid fire sale for a new company, and we're getting ready for the restructuring. And I had, a lot of people don't know this, but I had planned my exit a year before, right? I had been trying to think about how to thoughtfully exit at the right time, and there was never a right time because there was always one crisis after another. And and you answer those calls, right? Part of it, you answer them out of the goodness of your heart, and out of wanting to be there for your teams. Part of it you answer out of necessity, economic necessity, of I need a job, right? I need to, right? Like, let's be real here. But it's that combination of how much do I give of myself, and when does it end, right? And so I by the time that I left Vice, I had gone through what my colleagues called the longest transition. They joked with me. They were like, "You're not really leaving," right? Like, you've been telling us you're leaving for months, right? So it's the longest transition because I had been intent on designing an exit that felt dignified, and that felt like it was the right transition. I don't know about you, but in my career, I have been the person that has had to make up for someone deciding to leave in a tantrum, or over, something challenging, and all of a sudden trying to figure out, I'm like, okay, how do we communicate this? How do we keep their teams okay? How do we replace them? What does that look like? How do we just keep the lights on? And I didn't want to do that to anyone. So I left feeling exhausted, but I also left feeling a sense of completion of, I have found my replacement. I have trained my team. I have over communicated my exit to folks, and I am ready to start what will be next for me. But I also knew that it wasn't like I was going to step off and get back into the race again, right? I knew that what was next for me was just chill. I just needed to come back to myself.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about that because I love that you planned your exit, and you were thoughtful about that. But with so much runway of planning your exit, so many people would just, okay, I'm planning my exit into something else. Give myself a little 2 week, just a little 2 week lay down, 2 weeks at the beach.
Yes,
You know what I mean? Right? Like, but you said no. You said, I'm not just going to do a sabbatical. I'm doing a radical sabbatical. I'm about to examine. I'm about to put everything on the table and examine it. How did you even begin that? What was that process?
It was months in the making, and I credit my, she's an executive life coach, raw goddess, for helping me process through that. Because, like I said, it had been months and months of me thinking about, I need to leave, but what does that look like? And she was the one who just said, was like, what, don't you really just need a proper break? And I said, yes. And I had taken a sabbatical before, right? That one, my first sabbatical was an unplanned sabbatical, right? I had been part of a restructuring, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I have 11 months. What am I going to do with them? And back then I also had the tremendous benefit of a good friend of mine who's an executive coach helping me think about, and really not think about what to do, but really forcing me to pause. His mandate to me, if you will, was, don't even talk to headhunters. I need you to just take the summer off, right? I had 11 months, but he knew how my head was wired. He knew I was just going to go, go, go. He was like, just take the summer off and rest till you need to play, and play till you need to rest. And I remember looking at him and going, like, my people don't do that. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I need to figure out what my next job is going to be. I need to pay the mortgage. I need to take care of my family. And it was the best thing that I did, Andrea, but it took, and I want to say this because there are these angels in our lives, right? That help us see ourselves, and that help us put a mirror in front of us. So, Xander Grashaw was that angel. My first sabbatical, raw goddess, was in my second sabbatical, that person, that angel. And she had a client who had branded his sabbatical a radical sabbatical. So the minute she said, what about radical sabbatical, it just, like, the lights just went off for me. I was like, that's what I need. Whatever that is, I need that. And so that's how but then it was the planning. Okay, well, how does one prepare for a radical sabbatical? Because
Mhm.
if I'm not going to be working, something, something's got to take care of my family.
Mhm.
So it was how long do I need to work to save and make that happen? But then there was the structuring of, okay, what does it look like, right? What do I want to achieve, right?
Mhm.
What is it? And I knew that what I wanted to achieve at that point, and it was months through it, but it was still the same when I left. I knew that I needed to come back to myself. I knew I had lost a piece of me somewhere along the lines, and I wanted to come back to myself. I knew that I needed to rest and replenishment, right? I knew that I needed something nourishing. And so in the process of several months, it was, it took about, I think, 8 months since the beginning of my first conversation. I structured what I wanted to do. What was that going to look like? How was I going to support it financially?
Mhm.
And so by the time that I left, I just sort of entered into this, and I could articulate it. That's why, I started writing about it, and I actually wasn't going to write about it, Andrea.
Mhm.
I wasn't, because it part of what I thought my sabbatical. There's what you think, there's what you plan, and then there's what life gives you.
Mhm.
And I thought, oh, I'm going to travel, I'm going to write, I'm going to rest, and then I will also create some space for whatever playful energy comes my way, right? And it's wild because all of these crises kept on happening while I was planning this, and it just kept on delaying my exit date, and
Mhm.
I just kept on burning me out even more. I kept on getting more exhausted, and but also getting clearer on, oh, I need this, right? And it became a decisioning criteria for me, because when there were those options to, oh, can you stay longer, or can you think, and I was like, nope, I gotta go. Right. I was like, this, my life, my energy source needs this, but I can accommodate by staying a few extra months, right? I can accommodate this, but the end goal I'm getting to.
Mhm.
And then in the midst of that, and in the midst of all the crises that happen, I started thinking about the idea that became my next book, right?
Mhm.
But it was by being so low and still having this feeling, and I see you, right, that light in you, and seeing light in others, and going, I have a light in me. I've just let it get dimmed. But when we all show our light, we lead better. We take care of each other better. And that was the spark that really lit me up to write my book, Burnt Out to Lit Up. But the spark
Mhm.
that was lit in me to write about my radical sabbatical was not as positive one. It came from me writing my goodbye note. And in most goodbye notes, you say what you're going to do, right? Or you give the template of going to spend time with family and friends,
Right.
the general one. And I was like, I'm going to do that, but I've labeled it. I've created a beautiful brand that really feels resonant to me. So I'm going to say I'm going on a radical sabbatical, knowing that some people are going to look at this and go like, who the heck does she think she is, right?
Right, right.
And it happened. And it happened immediately as things happened at Vice. My note was leaked. I started getting calls from reporters immediately that night. I started getting notes from people saying all sorts of awful things. And
Wow,
then,
really?
oh yeah, yeah, it was like, because we had gone through such a tumultuous time, so I was already fodder for a lot of negative shame, social media shaming. And so I just said, this was on a Monday. On a Tuesday, I'm like, I'm going to post about this, and I'm going to own my story. And so I posted, I'm going on a radical sabbatical. Here's what I've been thinking. And the response was amazing. The
Mhm.
response was, when I sent it, I braced myself. I was like, ugh, okay. People may hate it. I may get all sorts of stuff, but like, this is my story, and I'm not letting anybody else shape it for me. That was what I was trying to do. But what I ended up doing was creating a space for people to find and share and speak about their excitement about sabbaticals, their fears about sabbaticals, the limitations they felt about taking sabbaticals. It was amazing.
So, first of all, I am shocked that you got any pushback from it. And it's just, I guess it's like What did people were like, oh, she has audacity. I guess, also I think being a woman having audacity, being a Latina having audacity is something that even
Gosh.
people within the community are not familiar with.
The privilege, I had just unfortunately had to lead a series of reductions in force at
Mhm.
Wise, where a lot of people had lost their jobs. My salary had been leaked, and it was like the audacity of an HR leader to make so much money. It's like, you don't ask other people about their salaries, but for some reason, I am an affront to you, right? There was the combination of all of that, and this, like, oh, look at her, she gets to take a radical sabbatical, but the rest of us, right, have had to be fired or whatnot. And what people didn't realize was that I also left. I left without a severance. I left without right. I
Wow.
didn't. I left without all these cushions that everybody
Yes.
was
The
assuming,
golden parachute that, yeah.
because I wanted to leave. Right. If I had stayed longer, which is as with most organizations, I was like, there would have been something, not
Mhm.
not huge, but something that I would have received. But I was so adamant about, I need to leave on my own terms, and that means I need to go this way, right? And I needed to protect what I could financially for my family, but also know I need to take this leap, or I may not exist after this, right? I just physically, emotionally, all of that. So yeah, but the pushback was there. It wasn't, I would say, I mean, I've been through all sorts of social media shaming, so it wasn't as
Mhm.
awful as it could have been, but it was, those really nasty notes here and there. But I have to say, they weren't anything compared to the love notes that I received,
Mhm.
and the inquiry about how does one do this, Daisy, or I want
Yes.
to shape this, or, and this, I know you'll appreciate this, the many people who came to me and said, I've been taking a sabbatical, but I just haven't talked about it, right? Because
Mhm.
there's so much shame associated with taking these times off. So there was an awakening that I found, and I've always, to your point earlier about, my mission, who I am, has always been consistent, right? I
Mhm.
can be anywhere. At the end of the day, I'm like, I'm really here to create spaces that work for everyone, right? That this is what I'm on this earth to do. Um, but it was in that milieu of all of that discussion and action and engagement that I realized it's like, this is what I do, right? This is the my space for sharing my experience. It doesn't have to meet everybody's expectations. But if it impacts one or two people, I'm good, right? If there's a
Mhm.
positive impact, and it did. It was, the stories I heard were beautiful.
I want to go back to the word burnout because I struggle with that word
Yeah.
because I feel like it puts the onus on the individual and doesn't take into account the environment and
Yes. Yeah.
how some environments leave burnout as the only option. Kind of
Ugh.
what's your take on that, especially with COVID, especially with everything that was going on?
Uh-uh.
Um, Financially with Vice at that time? Like, did you have any other choice but to be burned out?
No, I really, and it was to your point, a combination of the system, the things, everything that was happening. I think not I think Pooja Lakshman has a really great book called Real Self Care, and
Mhm.
in it she talks about burnout as not being our fault, but being the system's fault, right? A
Mhm.
system that's created to burn us out, and I absolutely agree with her. I quote her in my book. And I think it was a combination of all of that. But I also think that we have agency.
Mhm.
We have agency over what we choose. Sometimes we don't have all the choices available to us, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes we have to stay working because we have to put food on the table and a roof over our heads, and that's necessary. But how we respond to things, how we shape the conditions around us to create a space for breathing and for engaging differently, a lot of that is up to us. And that's
Mhm.
that's why I wanted to write this book, because my first book, Inclusion Revolution, is about the systems, right? It's
Mhm.
about all of these systems and policies and structures and processes that we can change as leaders in organizations. This book also speaks to the systems, but it really is about, what can you do, right? What are the things that you can do to not just avoid burnout, but to create the conditions so that you and everyone around you, especially if you're a leader, the people that you're responsible for, can avoid burnout, right? Can mitigate it, can transform from it, can change from it. And so I absolutely agree with you. We burn out from systems that were created to really just squash us, right? Like there is Kate Donovan, who I also interviewed for my book. She's the host of Fried, the Burnout podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Her definition of burnout is the slow decline of normal functioning in every aspect of life that happens due to chronic stress. That slow decline, those of us who are women of color, leaders, doers, whatever, the we're engaged, we are most prone to burnout because we're smart enough to see what's happening during that slow decline, but we just let it go, right? We are smart enough to know these conditions have been created to diminish me, to undervalue me, to hurt me, to push me to the edge. But I'm just going to keep at it because I'm going to make it better, right? I'm going to push through. I'm going to push through. I'm going to push through. And we push through so much that we have nothing to give anymore. And my premise right now, and part of my mission in life right now is to just remind everybody, we cannot pour from an empty cup. We have got to stop emptying ourselves so deeply that we no longer can take care of us and those that we love around us. And that feels like, this selfish act, right? It feels like, a revolutionary act in some ways, right?
Right.
But it is all of those things, and we deserve it, and we have to believe that we deserve it.
I think that's the core of it, is that we deserve it. And I do want to talk about your book more. It's called Burnout to Lit Up: How to Reignite the Joy of Leading People. And it comes out in September. So congratulations.
Yay!
We can't wait for
you.
it. It's described this way. This book is the roadmap you need to overcome obstacles, re-energize your leadership, and achieve new levels of success. Discover how to transform your approach to management and create a more engaged, motivated, and thriving workplace. Really focusing on leaders, because I don't think leaders really get a lot of empathy.
Oh no. It's funny. Someone asked me the other day, can you please write for more Gen Zers and younger employees because they're struggling so much at work? And I was like, I can do that. Absolutely. And she said, it was like, I think they need it more than leaders. And I was like, no, I don't think so. Here's the thing. We tend to think that the leaders are in these cushy jobs and that they've reached these positions. And so you don't need to worry about them. We need to worry about, to be fair, those that really truly feel the sore spots of organizations. And that's, more junior employees. But we forget that to lead is lonely. To lead is exhausting, right? To lead is more complex now than it has ever been, right? Our lives in general are just harder in general. And so it has also become harder to lead. And when a leader is not right within, the people that most feel it are their team members, those that report to them.
Yes.
Right? And so that is why I focus on leaders. That is why I focus on managers, right? Because we also tend to think that managers is like this old term of people who just, like push paper around and do these things. I was like, no. Increasingly, most organizations are made up of people who are in managerial positions, who lead people, who lead processes, who lead policies, right? And the complexity of that is enough to burn anyone down. And if we do not safeguard those individuals, we have no chance in hell to safeguard the rest of the organization.
It's really talking about, a lot of the conversation focuses like on the CEO or focuses on the employees, but it's really that middle group that is setting the culture, that is implementing the policy. And then everybody else kind of the foot soldier, but they are really creating the framework for the organization.
They have the most direct impact on the experience of workers and the external experience of customers and other stakeholders with the organization. We forget that. We it's all of that impacts how others perceive your organization and how they experience your services, your products, your ideas. That is the huge influence that leaders and managers have. And we tend to just and they tend to be sandwiched, as you noted, mostly, especially if you're not C-suite, let's say, although I have a lot of love for the C-suite, having sat there myself. But I was like, but if you're in between the C-suite and and the lower rank workers, if you will, it's like you're being asked to deliver on 1,000,001 demands that most of the time don't make sense because they're not clearly articulated or even aligned with strategy. And then you're also now increasingly meeting the demands of workers who have discovered their voice and who have discovered their agency, which I love, right? It makes our jobs harder for sure, but it is what creates thriving and dynamic organizations. But let's not diminish the fact that that takes a lot of work, cognitively, emotionally, physically. It's a big load.
What do you know now that you didn't know in August of last year?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't know how much lighter I would feel, but also um, how much more I still need to work at it. Right. Part of engaging in these journeys is, I'm gonna go into this without knowing how I'm gonna come out, but I know I'm gonna feel better. Right. I was like, I don't know what better looks like. I was like, but I need better. Right. And better for me has been lighter. I've used the word gentle a lot this year. I want to lead gently. I want gentleness to envelop me. And I am naturally impatient. I am high energy. I am right. This is how I'm wired. And I have to constantly remind myself, you want this gentleness. This gentleness is this next stage of your leadership and your evolution as a human. And so as much as I've wanted this, I still have to work at it. And a year later, I'm still working at it.
Of all the things you've done in your radical sabbatical, what do you think has been like the most impactful or had, really helped you return to yourself?
Oof. Well, I'll cheat and say two.
Okay.
Writing my book was healing. And that's I did not expect that. I did not expect that the process of writing the book would be as healing and as generative for me. I worked with a wonderful book coach, Bethany Saltman, and she used to joke with me because I used to send her pages every couple of weeks, and she'd say, I was like, I have to pull pages from my clients. It's like with you, I have to tell you like, okay, like less words. Because it was coming out of me. And that was transformative because there were stories that I hadn't processed yet from my childhood, right? And from work. And there was a sense of empowerment of being able to put it together, and gift it to the world and hoping that it will be helpful to someone else. So that was beautiful. And I will say I traveled a lot. I went on a few trips while I was on my sabbatical, and one of I'm thinking of the word in Spanish and I can't think of it in English. Retiro. Retreat. One of the retreats I went to was with all women in Costa Rica, the art of self love, and it was beautiful. We are still all of us on a WhatsApp group together and try to see each other all the time. And what was really beautiful was that it was a group of women, all of us different ages, different industries, different sectors, like you name it. But we all had some healing to do, and we did it together in this gorgeous location in Costa Rica, cared for by these two amazing organizers. We call them the Sarahs because both of their names are Sarah. And it was a week at the beginning of the year that I have to say I've been to a lot of retreats. They're all fantastic, but this one felt like there was a bonding and a healing that only all of us could do together. And so I'm deeply, deeply grateful. And those are, girlfriends for life.
I love that. I love that. And I think that is really important, especially because oftentimes when we feel this way, like the instinct is to retreat into solitude.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you ran towards community, I think is a really important aspect of the conversation.
I love that you say that because I'm one of those people that goes deep into like my hole. Right? Like,
Me too. Me too.
yeah, I just like, I don't talk. I don't, I'm folks would think the opposite of me, but I was like, no, I go deep into my hole. And one of my lessons in writing, right? So this was the healing part of writing. One of my lessons during that process, and I would say it was both the combination of writing my book and of writing what I was, what I called my weekly Radical Sabbatical Chronicles, right? My little update. I'm like, here's what's happening, and here's what
I
I've learned.
love those updates. I
It was
love them so
it was
much.
they were so fun. They were so generative. In the process of all of that, to your point, I realized, gosh, what I was missing was opening myself up to my community, right? I've always had a community. I've always had people who love me and who support me, and I'm deeply grateful for that. But I wasn't opening myself up to my community. They didn't know what was going on, right? I wasn't sharing all of this. And in this sharing, not only was I freeing myself, but it was the beauty of seeing others feel that they could free themselves up as well. That was just such joy.
I love it. I love it. And so our last segment is a perfect segue. It's called Act Up ACT. Those are my initials. And if somebody is feeling like I'm not just exhausted, like I'm at the wall, like
Yeah.
as you said, I'm crispy, I'm burnt crispy. What are some steps they can take today to kind of get them into that space to really start processing all of that?
Yeah, I share a lot of strategies in Burnt Out, and I'll share four that I find are sometimes the hardest, but really the most critical for us to consider. The first is that we have to deepen our self awareness, right? Rumi eloquently said, "You carry the cure. We are our own cure," but we need to hold up a mirror and really understand what is that soul, that soulful balm within us that can heal us, right? What does it look like to think about, how do I want to show up? How do I want to show up right now? How do I tap into my best self regardless of what's been handed to me, right? What does providing clarity instead of confusion look like, right? I love questions, but it's those moments of self-awareness, and it require us to ask ourselves those really, really tough questions. And I will say that the second piece is to release the shame. We carry so much shame that we don't say out loud, but it weighs us down. And part of that exploration of self awareness is to acknowledge the shame, to see it for what it is, and to put it aside and say, no longer, no more. If we spend enough time and energy every day, right, every week, thinking about, I'm responding to this not because of how this person said it to me, but because I'm carrying such shame about myself that I'm not even listening to what they're saying. I'm just reacting. I'm not responding in the moment. And in that, and in those actions, we diminish relationships. We overload ourselves. We overload other people, and all of that leads to this chronic stress and exhaustion that diminishes our normal functioning. And so, spending some time on self awareness and asking ourselves those really, really tough questions, and then really focusing on, how do I release the shame that is bogging me down, that is weighing me down, and that is inhibiting me from showing up the way that I want to show up in the world.
I love that. I love that, Daisy. How can we keep in contact with you? I know the book is coming out in
Yes.
September. So excited about that. And how else can we support you?
Oh, thank you so much. Well, my community is LinkedIn. So you can always find me on LinkedIn, Daisy Auger-Dominguez. On Instagram, my website is also my name, Daisy Auger-Dominguez.com. The Burnt Out to Lit Up comes out on September 18th, but it is on pre-order now. And so I would be delighted. Pre-orders are the lifeblood of the launch of books. It's on Amazon, it's on Bookshop, it's on Barnes and Noble. Burnt Out to Lit Up, How to Reignite the Joy of Leading People.
Thank you for doing this out loud, because I know that, it's hard to share. It's really hard to share, especially in the LinkedIn space. Like, I don't know, LinkedIn, it's just a different.
Well, because we're supposed to play, because we're also, part of what you and I are doing is breaking through these professionalism norms that were never intended for people that look like us, right?
Right.
And so there are these white professionalism norms of how you show up, how prim and proper you look. But you and I both know, and I tell this to leaders all the time, your teams know you're not perfect. Like, why are you trying to fake the funk here? Because it's too much work to act differently. You can act appropriately, you can act respectfully, you can act in a balanced way that meets the environments that you're in. But you and I also both know that LinkedIn has become a lot softer and a lot more social. And I'm not hating it, right? I'm not going to go out and say all the things that are happening to my kid every day on LinkedIn, right? But there are lessons and learnings that are applicable from our lives to our work experience that I think it's fair to share, and that it creates a universal experience, because then people no longer think like it's only them. And that has been such a trap for so many years, for so many of us.
And also just the idea of a sabbatical outside of academia, because at first it was just only professors to take it. And then being a woman of color, taking it, just having the audacity, it means so much. So thank you for being on. Thank you for doing this out loud. Like, I'm so excited. I'm so excited that we can make this happen.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. I am honored and grateful and support you and want to see you thrive, because when you thrive, we all thrive.
Likewise. Thanks for listening to The Next Best Thing with Andrea Cline-Thomas, a Mountain Court Media production. The music was written, recorded, and produced by Gavin Casey, also known as Dark Purple. Now, if you like what you heard, please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and write a comment on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to share it with friends. And I hope this episode helps you on your journey. See you next time.